Hello, welcome to the Community Show. I'm Hari Berzins, and I'm at Spikenard Farm with Alex Tuchman, the director of Spikenard Farm. Thanks for having us, Alex.
You're welcome.
So can you tell our viewers a bit about your history here at Spikenard, personally?
Sure. Yeah, I arrived at Spikenard 7 years ago, and I came from Loyola University, Chicago, a student farm that I was part of starting at the university. And that's where I fell deeply in love with honeybees, and so that brought me here to the Blue Ridge Mountains, where Spikenard Farm began 12 years ago now. And when I arrived here 7 years ago, I came as an intern and very quickly became the farm manager and then the program director and then a co-director, and now I'm a director.
Wow,
Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, we are very lucky to be standing on this hilltop in this beautiful fall morning, and I'm looking forward to learning about what you do here and touring the ground. So maybe we could go ahead and start with a tour.
Sounds wonderful.
Okay.
So 12 years ago, this was a cow pasture. It was grazed. And since then, everything that you'll see as we go on our tour today has been developed really with the idea that the bees need a safe place to heal. And that's what a sanctuary is. A sanctuary for all kinds of beings is always for protecting the one that you created for. We don't want to live in a world without them. We don't want to see a world and try to adapt to something that would be devoid of honeybees. And yeah, people like Albert Einstein have been quoted saying that if the bees go, we have about 4 years left on this earth, which is very dramatic to say. But also, it just gives some sense that there would be a real catastrophe to lose these creatures. And yeah, in the U.S. in the last year, we've lost 45% of our honeybees. And in the year before, in 2019, it was about 55% of our honeybees. So each year, the amount of bees that are being lost is, it's both unsustainable for nature and also it's challenging to be a beekeeper. Because if you're losing so many hives every year, you really, it's hard to keep something like that going. So actually beekeepers going bankrupt is just as big a problem. People that aren't able to actually make a business out of the bees anymore. And for us, that's also a sign, also an indication that something's happening that's not healthy, that's not good for the bees if they can't survive. So the vision for a sanctuary is really to create a place where the land, where the nectar and the pollen that we plant for the bees can really give them health and vitality, that they can get what they need on a healthy landscape. And so we feel blessed to have arrived here in Floyd, where we're surrounded in the Blue Ridge Mountains by a gorgeous landscape with a huge diversity of flowering trees and bushes, and where the ditches along the roads are filled with flowers, and where we can create a place too at the end of Hideaway Lane, which is a dead-end road without much traffic and with really friendly neighbors to our project. To truly provide a place of healing where we can be breeding bees that are gaining in vitality and strength. And then one of our biggest products from the bees is actually selling bees. We're breeding and selling healthy queens and the hive that comes along with them, and spreading those out to beekeepers all across the region and all across the country. From here you can actually see the Little River, just a little piece of it down at the bottom of the valley there. And our land borders with the Josephine Porter Institute, and then their land borders with Riverstone Organic Farm.
So it is quite a friendly area for bees with the organic.
It's wonderful, yeah. And of course, to be in relationship to a big organic farm, our bees go help to pollinate their crops so that they can have a bigger yield. But also it's wonderful for our bees that there's organic growing going on in our area.
And how far do they travel?
Yeah, that's one thing about bees that's different from like having other livestock like cows or sheep. You can put up a fence and keep your cows and sheep on your land,
Right.
and you know what they're eating and you know what they're drinking mostly. But for the honeybees, they fly in about 3 miles in all directions. So, yeah, a fence isn't going to help to keep the bees on healthy organic forage. They will go, if there's dandelions here, they'll stay close to home first and go to our dandelions, but then if the neighbor has dandelions and decides to spray Roundup, it's not that my bees are going to be safe from that because it's a different property. They go to the flowers that need to be pollinated.
So speaking of dandelions, it's a common conversation, and I grew up in suburbia, and it seems that there's a war against dandelions, and I understand they're some of the first food for bees in spring. Is that right?
Exactly. Yep. The dandelion, it's like, for us it's a celebration. We actually have a Dandelion Festival here every year, and that's how we open up our open days. So our tours and things begin, and it's usually like mid-April when the dandelions come into bloom in our fields here, and our lands we just mow paths like through the dandelions because it is, like you said, such an important food source for the honeybees, but also for the ruby-throated hummingbird, for the swallowtail butterfly. Those, the butterflies and the hummingbirds actually rely on the bloom of dandelion for their migration, and they follow the dandelion further north as it goes up all the way to Maine from the southern United States. And for the honeybees, it's the biggest nectar flow since last fall, since the goldenrod and the wingstem were out. So between now and April, there's really no big flow of nectar or pollen for the bees until the dandelion comes into bloom. And the dandelion is usually in bloom at the same time as the apple orchard and the peaches and things like that. And so when the orchard and the dandelion are there in the early spring, the reason we have a festival is because we've been worried all winter long, are our bees going to be okay? Are they going to have enough food? Because they have to survive all winter long on the honey that they stored from the year before. So, yeah, when the dandelion comes, they actually turn away from that honey that was stored from the previous year and focus on that new flow, the fresh flow of nectar. And dandelion is like, well, it's a medicine for the human being. It's also a medicine for the bees. It helps to clear their digestive system. And it gets them ready for a whole new season of making honey and collecting pollen and pollinating and taking care of their hives. So the other thing that we do here in honor of the bees that's different from other beekeepers is that we actually leave the bees all the honey that they need for the winter. So we don't harvest a big amount of honey in the fall, which is the normal beekeeping practice. But we feel that actually that honey is first and foremost for the bees. And then what's left over is harvested by us in the spring. So the dandelion comes into bloom, and then we do our big honey harvest.
There's another reason for a festival.
It really is a big festival for us, yeah.
So let's see what you have growing here, what the bees are feeding on.
Yeah, sounds lovely. Yeah, this field here, right now it's buckwheat. And so these buckwheat have all now gone to seed. But buckwheat is one of the bees' favorite forage plants. It's quite an interesting forage, and this is kind of typical of flowers. Once you learn more and more about how different flowers are, the buckwheat gives nectar only until about 10 in the morning or 10:30 in the morning. And then it's like somebody turned off the valve, and no nectar for the rest of the day. So in the mornings, when it's warm and the buckwheat is blooming, you'll see a field covered in buckwheat. And then at about 10:30, you'll come and take a look, and you'll see not a single bee. And for some hobby beekeepers, maybe who have a day job, or anybody who is away from their buckwheat for the day, they might have a difficulty sometimes seeing bees in there and say, "Oh, the bees don't like the buckwheat at all. I've never seen a bee in it." But it just might be that they're not checking before 10 in the morning. So yeah, each flower is so unique and special, and you'll hear me say again and again about how the flowers truly are a medicine for the bees. And that's one thing that conventional beekeeping takes away from the bees in those practices, is that the bees need a diversity of different nectar sources in their diet. They can't just eat one thing and be healthy. And so when the bees are trucked from one monoculture to another monoculture to pollinate the almonds and then to pollinate the apples and alfalfa and so on and so forth, they're going to these places where there's really only one thing in bloom. All the weeds have been sprayed away. And so when you just have one thing, I mean, can you think of one food that you could eat for 3 weeks only?
That's a challenge.
Breakfast, broccoli. You want a snack midday? Broccoli. You want how about lunch? Broccoli. Dinner? Broccoli.
Doesn't sound very fun.
Yeah. Broccoli is really a healthy thing, but I don't think you would be healthy if you ate it for only 3 weeks.
After a while, you would be maybe not want to eat it anymore.
Exactly. Yeah, so the bees are put into that situation all the time in conventional beekeeping, and so here we really feel diversity is the most important thing, and to try to have something blooming for the bees through every season of the year.
And then here I see you've got, like some different plants that have just kind of come up naturally.
Exactly, yeah. So this is a completely organic garden. We're managing our systems in biodynamic agricultural practices.
And I see, is that goldenrod trying to grow out in the middle, or is that a different?
Yeah, in that meadow there's goldenrod and boneset, and we can go over there and take a look. This one here is a wonderful one called fall aster. It's all these kind of daisy yellow and white flowers. So
and
the bees.
Is this wild, or did you?
Yeah, but we cultivated and planted as well. And
so
then,
you're saving the seeds from it?
Right.
And then
just spreading them again. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we've established this meadow also with a diversity of different things in here too that bloom all through the course of the season. But yeah, this one is the goldenrod. There's many different varieties of goldenrod. This is the Canada goldenrod. But we have 4 or 5 different varieties here, each of them a little bit different bloom time, and yeah, that's part of the diversity that gives the bees something at many different points in the season. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And
so local folks who work really hard to keep pastures mowed, but maybe don't really need the pasture land, could let something go wild this way to feed the bees.
Yeah, and there's a lot. There's a lot you can do in terms of spreading native seeds and actually developing the diversity of a pasture. It doesn't happen only by its own, but even if you just let something go here in the Blue Ridge Mountains, you would get goldenrod, you would get wingstem, you would get ironweed, and you would get the fall aster. Those would all be there. Mm-hmm. So very, very easy just to provide forage for the bees, and also to let your hay or to let the grasses in the pasture grow up. It also provides forage for native bees. Like bumblebees thrive in habitat like this, where the grass grows up one year and then falls over, and it makes sort of like a little nest in there. And the bumblebees' favorite habitat is actually when mice will make nests. Field mice will make nests in the grass. The next year, the bumblebees will move in and use that nest to create their little hive.
Oh, I did not know that.
Yeah. So the native bees are really just as important as the honeybees, and if we had more of them, we would be better off. The honeybees are very special because they're the only insect that's truly domesticated. So they're really in a deep relationship with the human being, and they need us to survive. And in our evolution, we've also grown accustomed and built our whole agricultural practices around also needing the honeybees to survive. So we're in a mutual dependence of each other. And we use different herbs and things for different purposes. Usually with the mountain mint, we use it for smoker fuel. So when we work the bees, we give them a little puff of smoke before we open up the hive. So when we harvest this mountain mint, we cut it back, we dry it, and then we chop it up into smoker fuel. And we do that also with lavender and with sage and with oregano and with thyme and with echinacea and with all these different herbs that have a great smell to them. And yeah, that's very calming for the bees to use that kind of smoke before you open. And for us, it's like the doorbell. So we give a few puffs of smoke at the entrance of the beehive, and then we open. The bees already know that we're coming. Instead of just going to the beehive and ripping off the lid and, beginning your work, it's really a training. The bees can be trained like a cow or like a dog or like a horse. They really become accustomed. If you are consistently giving them just a little puff of smoke at the entrance every time you open, it becomes like a hello and a greeting, and it's not stressful or anything like that.
I wouldn't mind a puff of aromatic smoke to say hello.
Right.
That would be okay with me.
A little smudging ceremony.
If I were a bee, yes, that would be nice.
Yeah. Yeah. So when we come around here, we're kind of entering the most diverse garden that we have at the sanctuary, which is lined with these beautiful basket weaving willows. So these willows bloom in late February when basically nothing else is in bloom. Usually in Virginia here we catch a few warm days in February or early March, and then these beautiful willows are covered in catkins and just full of bees, and this is a really important nectar or pollen source for the bees.
And they make a beautiful hedge.
Yeah, and they make a beautiful basket too.
Ah.
They've been used for weaving baskets for thousands of years, and also for making beehives. So we can use these to make beehives from. Yeah, so this is the garden that has the greatest diversity. We kind of look at this space as the medicine cabinet, where the bees go to get a large variety and maybe not that much quantity. They might only get a little bit of Rudbeckia, or a little bit of Cosmos, or a little bit of Zinnia, or a little bit of the Vitex, the chaste tree. But all of that is mixed into the honey, and that honey is what the bees are using to survive the wintertime. So if that food source is derived from a landscape like this, or a garden like this, the bees have a much better chance of remaining healthy through the course of the cold, dark winter, when there's nothing to eat but that honey. And if they have to try to survive winter on honey that's only almond nectar, for example, or only clover nectar, for example, or only alfalfa nectar, anything that's just not a balanced diet for them is quite difficult. And then they come into spring quite weak, and then the beekeepers have all these different strategies to try to keep them alive by feeding them pollen, or boosting them by trying to feed them sugar syrup, or all these practices that are not necessary if the relationship between the bees and the land is healthy. So, yeah, one of our primary missions is really to share just how easy it is and just how important it is to plant a few flowers.
Yeah, and in a garden, flowers, of course, they're attracting the pollinators. Is what I try to intersperse flowers. But this time of year, when the vegetable harvest is winding down, the flowers just seem to take over.
Yeah.
And it brings a lot of joy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Definitely.
So I think I'm in agreement for sure that the flowers are important, and certainly for the pollinators, but I think the humans need them too. Just to feel some bit of hope when everything's dying. Seems the flowers just jump up and say, but we're still here. Yeah. And I see somebody here. What is this?
Yeah, this is a blue-winged wasp. It's a solitary wasp. So often as adults, they feed on nectar or pollen, but they will go and they'll sting an insect like a caterpillar, and they'll lay their egg on top of that caterpillar, and they'll put it into a little clay container that they make themselves, and then when that egg hatches out, it eats the caterpillar, which is still paralyzed, so still alive.
Wow.
And yeah, it's amazing what the differentiation between a wasp and a bee is what does that insect feed its young ones. A wasp always feeds its larvae with meat, so with like chewed up caterpillars or some other insect, or flesh of an animal or something like that. And a bee always feeds its larvae from nectar and pollen. So bees are completely vegetarians, and wasps and hornets, yellow jackets, and ants are all more omnivorous.
So can bees sting, or is that just wasps?
Yeah, bees can sting. Yeah, and yeah, wasps are more well known for stinging. That's one of the greatest misconceptions that you find everywhere, is that if you get stung by something or you step on a nest of something, the thing I hear most commonly is, I got stung by bees.
Right.
So it's actually the insect order of the Hymenoptera are the bees, the ants, the wasps, and the hornets, and they're all differentiated into different families. And bees are so gentle. They're really sweet creatures in a different way, and I do have a great love for the other ones too, for the wasps and the hornets. But the bees tend to get a bad rap, mostly because of the yellow jackets.
Yellow jackets have the yellow, so you think, if you don't know the difference, you can think they're bees, and they are aggressive.
Yeah.
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 That's unfortunate.
If you disturb their nests.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the bees don't sting very often, though. They sting maybe when they're afraid, or...
Yeah. Yeah, the bees will feel like when they're made to feel vulnerable or attacked or something like that, then they will sting. But in general, they're not aggressive. When we go and we open up the beehives here with classes or with interns, we're just wearing whatever we wore to work that day. We don't wear a veil, a suit, or gloves or anything like that, because we don't need to. We have a good relationship to the bees. We go to them really quite peacefully. We're asking the bees what they need, so they're fine when we open up the hive, because we do it in a very gentle way.
I give them a lavender smoke.
Yeah.
They're so relaxed.
Yeah. So each of our hives we call by name, and they each have their own personality, their own temperament and way of relating to the beekeeper. And this hive, Lucia, is the oldest hive at the sanctuary. She's now 11 years old. So right when the sanctuary first began, Lucia was here with us, and so she has persisted in this same spot for 11 years now.
And when you're speaking of the hive, is it the structure or is it the actual colony?
It's the actual colony.
Okay.
So we look at each bee as like a cell in the whole body. And even though all of these bees won't be the same exact bees that are here, because there's that turnover just like in our blood, new cells being born, old ones dying. Same thing for the honeybee colony, but the hive really keeps the same personality, the same temperament. Of course, they have the same genetic lineage, and each year even the queen is replaced, usually at least once a year. And that's a natural process, just the same picture as if the queen is being replaced just like another cell in the body, and the hive is able to continue. So one swarm or one hive becomes two hives through the process of swarming, where half of the bees will leave with the old queen, and then a new queen will hatch into this hive and inherit the work and take over. But it's an amazing thing to get to know beehives, because they really do carry a personality with them that shows how it truly is greater. The whole is greater than the sum of its parts.
Mm-hmm.
Because if I would come over and accidentally knock this hive over, we've had it happen before actually at our other location where we're keeping bees, that some goats came and were grazing through and knocked over a beehive.
Mm.
And it was 4 years before that beehive recovered from that traumatic event.
Mm.
They were agitated and really were not able to just go back to normal, even though all of the bees were new bees and all of the new queen. It's not that each one of these bees is having thoughts and feelings like we are, but really the whole organism carries the personality.
And how would you describe the personality of, what's this hive's name?
Her name is Lucia.
Lucia.
Lucia is slow and steady. She's a little bit timid sometimes. She doesn't always have like a really strong buildup of wax, and she sort of she holds back a little bit. I would say there's some hives that don't hold back at all, but she's one who her temperament somehow is quite conservative and a little bit reserved, and she's never the biggest hive every year, and she's never the smallest hive every year. She's just sort of steady. And that has proved quite successful. She swarms, so she gives birth like once every 2 years. Different hives have different rhythms of that. Some hives give birth like 3 or 4 times in 1 year. And some hives like her will sort of wait to do that.
That's amazing. It makes me think about the things that we pass on to our lineage.
Yeah.
That they're passing this personality on.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it is amazing. At first when you meet the honeybees, I think it can be interesting to try to relate to this as an animal or as like a whole. But yeah, as you get to know a hive and then compare what Lucia is like next to what Lobelia is like, or Leela, or Frisky, or Persephone, or Lily, or Sorella, or Francis, or Frau Aries, and so on. You really get to meet an individual in each one. And that's something very, very special.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they all look different too.
Yeah.
The actual structure.
Right. Yeah. There's different boxes and different styles. Yeah, for us it's not actually the type of hive that's the problem, but it's the mindset of the beekeeper. Because if all I'm trying to do is get as much as I can out of these creatures, then I'm never going to leave them enough.
Mm-hmm.
They're not going to have the wherewithal to survive, to be resilient, to be adaptable, to make it through a tough winter, to overcome pests like the varroa mite, parasites and diseases and things like that. They need to be resilient and strong in order to do that.
And at Spikenard, are you also teaching classes to help people learn methods that you're practicing here?
Yeah, that's one of our major functions as members of the beekeeping movement, is to offer beekeeping methods that actually work and help the bees to stay alive and to thrive.
Okay.
So, yeah, we have a 90% survival rate of our colonies over the course of the 12 years Spikenard has been here. So our bees are thriving. They're doing great and surviving. And that's something that is pretty rare today and special. And yeah, we're standing on the shoulders of giants here. There's a lineage of biodynamic beekeeping that's been passed down and practiced for over 100 years that really has continued a long historical tradition of honoring what the bees need and considering them sacred. So she's here for a few years, and we created this form and this type of hive here at the sanctuary. So this is our design. The bees seem to love it.
What's that made of?
It's made out of cow dung and clay and straw. And it's about 3 inches thick. So it gives the bees a great insulation. It keeps them warmer in the winter months and cooler in the summer months. And that's really what the bees need, is a homeostatic temperature. They need to keep it around 95 degrees year-round. So in order to do that, the better insulated the hive, the better it is for the bees. And also, the rounder the hive shape is, the better it is for the bees. They really thrive in round shapes. Their entrance is actually up here. Not exactly by design, but they chose to gnaw this little hole in the cow dung and the clay, and so they actually made this their entrance. And this was the entrance here that we provided for them, and they can still go in and out from here. But for whatever reason, they like to take a shortcut.
And are they building the frames themselves, or how is that inside?
Yeah, this hive, it's 2 baskets that we wove out of rye straw. So we grow the rye straw here, and it's a rye straw that gets about 6 feet tall, so it's really nice for weaving baskets. So we wove a basket on the bottom, we wove a basket on the top, and then we put it together with this woodenware, and there are wooden bars that go over the top of this hive in arches, and the bees build their comb down from the top and into this big open cavity.
So it's more of a natural shape.
Yeah, exactly. It mimics what the inside of the nest looks like. Like if you would let the bees build naturally, the form of that comb would be very close to this shape. And the round form is something very common in nature for nests. Like a bird's nest isn't a square or a rectangle, it's round. And same for the bees. The queen begins to lay her eggs in the center of the comb, and she spirals outward in a round form. So basically everything they do is in roundness, and it's something that really promotes the capacity of the bees to stay warm in the winter, and they don't get like cold corners where condensation builds up and mold builds up and things like that. But in the roundness, they can actually circulate the warmth and adjust the humidity. They can actually sense both the warmth and the humidity of the hive with their antenna, and that's how they gauge what's needed for the nest. And every single egg, in order to incubate, every egg the queen lays needs to be incubated to at least 95 degrees. 98 degrees is even better. Hello. What do you think? Don't want to hear much.
Like, what are you doing in here?
Yeah.
Are you in there very often?
Every day.
Oh, so they're used to you. You're just saying hi.
Maybe she had a rough morning or something.
Well, I smell skunk.
Mm-hmm.
Are they after the bees?
Oh yeah.
Uh-huh.
They're probably the main predator of bees here in Floyd, or in our area. They go up to the entrance at night, and they scratch at the entrance, and they lure out the guard bees, and then the guard bees come to attack the predator, and the skunk just takes its front hands there and just eats them up. I've watched them do it. They can eat like a quarter pound of bees in one night.
Oh my gosh.
Which is a lot, like hundreds of bees.
Should we talk about that on camera?
Well, I recorded it.
You got all of that?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I didn't know if you were rolling.
Yeah.
Oh, well, you got it then. So, what do you do to keep the skunks from getting to the bees?
On a challenging year when there's a lot of skunk pressure, I will trap and kill skunks. But usually, I try to make a pact with the skunks and say, you're welcome here, but not in the beehives. And if we see too much skunk activity around the bees, you're going to have to go. And that helps, actually.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of funny, but it does work. We're fine if they're in the lawn here digging up the Japanese beetle grubs, and they have an important place in nature. They'll eat yellow jacket nests.
Mm-hmm.
They'll do all kinds of good, helpful things. But so we don't mind them in our area and in our sanctuary, but just not near the beehives.
Yeah. And so when you capture them, you just get them in a cage or something.
Yeah.
In a trap.
Yeah, I use chicken or something and I have a heart trap. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Gotcha. And I was walking past this building. Is that where you're having classes?
Yeah, that's an outdoor teaching space. And then we have an indoor teaching space in the bigger building, which we call the bee barn. That place we call the pavilion.
So normal times, you would have groups of people come out and have a class.
Yeah. Yeah, we usually have 25 or 30 people per class, and we have classes going all throughout the season. And sometimes it's beginner beekeepers, sometimes it's advanced beekeepers, sometimes there's professional beekeepers. Often we'll have student groups, high school classes, elementary school, middle school, come for field trips or for just day visits, all kinds of people coming to join us.
And that's always on a Friday when you're doing those, or those are different when you have scheduled events?
Yeah, when we have scheduled events, they're usually weekends or sometimes week-long programs, just depending what it is. Yeah. There's some yellow jackets trying their luck at the entrance and not finding an easy way in.
So what interests, why do they want in? For honey?
Yeah, they'll go and rob honey.
Ah.
Yeah. So, and they'll also eat bees and they'll eat larvae. So, yeah, they're...
And the other, what you call them, the garter bees?
Yeah.
They're keeping
the
them
guards
away?
are keeping them away,
Yeah.
chasing them out. There's
one.
one right here. I don't know how long it'll...
The guard bees are doing their work, so they probably won't be around for long.
There it is.
You see it? It's bright yellow. It's right on the top
It's on the
board.
top now, yeah. Oh, flew away.
So they're mostly unsuccessful.
Yep. With a weak hive, the yellow jackets find an easy way in. If the bees can't guard their entrance well, if they're not very strong, then the, I don't know if you've heard about they're calling them the killer hornets or the great Asian hornets. They're no problem for a healthy beehive. It's only for the weaker colonies that those robbers have success. 7th graders here for a week, and so they use this space and camped, and this is a bathhouse, so they have a shower and some sinks and toilets. And it's really a fun experience to have a group of students here for a whole week. When I first told them that we were going to collect cow dung and mix it with clay and straw and put a new face on the bread oven, they were all like, "Cow dung? That's gross." But wouldn't you believe it? An hour later, they had their shoes off and they were jumping in it, and we had to bring them down to the river and make sure everyone had a good scrub after that. But they had an idea, not at the beginning, but as they were going, they eventually decided they wanted to turn it into a bear. So that's what they went for. But it's peeling off a little bit, and
so it's cow dung and clay?
Cow dung, clay, and rye straw, and a little bit of ash. Here's one of those digger bees. This is a dead one, actually, but they make their little nests in this earth. So mason bees are a solitary bee type that makes their nests in little holes. You can see there's a living one right there guarding her hole. Yeah. So those are called digger bees. Great pollinators. They look a lot like bumblebees.
Watch behind you.
Yeah, so when we have pizza parties or when we have workshops, I use this to bake bread, different events and things. And then we also have a learn to make sourdough bread and bake in a wood-fired oven class every year. So we teach people how to make the oven and how to make bread. And then we also have classes for teaching people how to make those sun hives, those hanging basket hives. Every October.
And do they make one while they're here?
Yeah, and they make one in the course of a day and a half, and it's really fun weaving those rye baskets. Yeah, from our own rye.
And this is a facility that people can camp here, or how does it work?
We invite people who are taking a workshop here to camp if they would like.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you have platforms for tents?
Yeah. For tents, and they're also nice places for people in the morning to do their stretches or yoga or whatever. Right, so that's my house, straight through.
All the way down to the end?
Of the road here, yeah. You see the little greenhouse down there?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Okay.
that's my place, and then this hoop house. So we have a little greenhouse where we start our seeds, and we also grow all of the pollinator plants that we have planted around the property, and we also sell them to beekeepers and gardeners and people who want to plant for the pollinators and plant for the bees. And then we just sort of, like, this is what you were talking about earlier, this was another old pasture that we're basically selecting and seeding for pollinator plants. So the amount of wonderful things for the bees is just abundant. And you can hear all the insect life.
Oh, yeah.
So these are all herbs that we're drying for bee tea that we make. So we actually feed the bees, and instead of, a lot of beekeepers use just a hot water to mix with their syrup in order to feed the bees, and most beekeepers feed their bees sugar. But we feed our bees honey, and in order to liquefy the honey, we'll make what we call a bee tea. So the bee tea has all these wonderful herbs in it. This is the sage drying here, and on some of the other tables we also have mint and oregano, and we have also in this bee tea mixture we have nettles and dandelion and yarrow and chamomile and lemon balm and rue and hyssop, and a whole bunch of wonderful herbs that really help the bees' digestive system when we're feeding them. So we harvest those herbs and dry them in this room. And then beekeepers all around the world are buying it to help feed their bees something healthy and good.
Amazing.
Oh yeah, this is a seed-saving project.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, this is called Gaillardia or blanket flower. So we're also saving seeds. Each seed, of course, was a flower which was kissed by a bee. And in our programs here, we always offer seeds for the honeybees so that people can take some seeds home. You can order them online also and plant the favorites for what the bees love in your own garden. So normally this is actually a teaching room. This is where we hold most of our in-person workshops when we're teaching lectures, and then we go outside for the experiential portions, for opening beehives and etc., working in the gardens.
It's a beautiful space.
Yeah. The basement, we have the wood shop, and right through here, this is the room that we use for salve making and things like that. Mostly we're storing right now, I guess. But so these are all the different herbs that we've been drying through the course of the season. And then, yeah, we also store our bottled honey in here for sale. It's really good honey. And I'd like to give each of you one of these jars.
What?
Yeah.
That's the best present ever. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks.
Yeah, hold on
Love
to that
it.
for me, Hari.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, and so we save and we melt down wax, beeswax, and this has just gone through its first initial melting, so it still has all of these impurities and things in it now. So I'll melt this again and strain it through a pantyhose. So I'll just pour the fresh wax like through a pantyhose and into a container. Usually I use those carry-out containers that they have at the Floyd Country Store.
Mm-hmm.
You can just save them and
Perfect.
100% compostable.
That's true.
But yeah, so we will pour the wax through the pantyhose and then it comes out this wonderful, fresh wax.
And then you make the salves.
And then you can make salves, candles,
Mm-hmm.
things like that with that product. So, and we're doing a lot of different. I mean, everything from the beehive is healing, a healing substance. So this is propolis, and it's in an alcohol, in vodka, and this is just basically making a tincture out of it, and this is antiviral, antifungal, antibacterial. It's really great for a sore throat. It's one of the fantastic medicines that comes from the beehives is derived from the propolis.
And what part of the hive is that? I don't know my terminology.
Propolis is harvested. The bees paste it in all of like the cracks and the crevices in order to decrease all draft in the hive. So to make it nice and warm and airtight. And the propolis they actually gather from the buds of trees, from like sappy buds. Like if you've ever grabbed a chestnut bud, it's like your fingers stick to it. The buds have these resins that they exude at this time of the year, and it forms this protective coating around the bud so that it can make it through the cold, dark winter, the bud of the tree. But the bees collect some of that resin, and they use those resins to seal up like glue all the drafty places in their hive. And so when you're cleaning up a hive after it's died or after you've removed a box or something like that, you can scrape out all the old propolis and then make a tincture out of it. So like this is, for example, propolis that we've scraped from hives that are no longer using it. So we just put that, we fill about half a mason jar with the propolis and then pour 80 proof alcohol into it to make the extraction.
It smells good.
Yeah, I mean, it's these tree resins that the bees collect. So it's from a huge diversity of different trees, different local trees, and it has all these incredible qualities of, like I said, antiviral and antibacterial, and it's wonderful for a cold, and
Wow.
yeah, it's what the resins are doing for the bud. Actually, you can see that it also helps us for a cold and things like that.
Are you also selling that, or is that something you make for your
That's something we
selves?
make for ourselves and for friends. Yeah. Yeah. So this is our wood shop, where, of course, we do a lot of maintenance and repair of our own equipment and buildings and things like that. But we're also producing some of the best-selling products, or one of the best-selling products is this entrance reducer, which goes on the front entrance of a hive, and it has this special feature, which we don't have a great name for. Well, maybe it's a great name. We call it a Doohickey, and this helps us to open and close and control the size of the entrance. So for example, if you have a whole bunch of yellow jackets that are coming and trying to invade a weaker hive, you can take this doohickey and you can close up the entrance so that the guard bees have a much smaller place to defend. And that really helps from any robbing from yellow jackets or bees or other things. And it also prevents mice from getting inside the colony, which is a danger in the fall and in the winter.
They could get in an entrance that small?
They can't get in an entrance that small, but that's why we have the entrance reducers, because the normal entrance, if you didn't put one of those on, it would be big enough for a mouse to get in.
Gotcha. So you're manufacturing those here for sale and then maybe making hives? Or,
yeah. Let me show you the different...
What do you call them? Boxes? The boxes?
Yeah, hives, boxes. There's so many different styles of hive that... yeah.
And is that another product you have, or is that
Yep,
just...
we do sell beehives here. Mm-hmm. So this is one of the sun hives that we wove and we covered with paste. Again, this was a project, and this is one actually that we made last year. So you can see the Rye Woven Basket.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
That's beautiful.
So we weave that with reed with people every year, and then cover it with that cow dung clay and straw mixture. But it needs all these different woodenware pieces, and yeah, and then this is another hive style that we've developed here. Right now it's called the Spikenard Hive. So you can see it has a thick insulated roof, so that the heat of the hive, when it rises, it just meets that insulation, and so the hive can stay nice and snug for the winter. And then it has this form, which is a round form. So this is one used for those willow branches that I was showing earlier. We make little frames from those willows because of how we made this structure nice and curved. And this is something that allows the bees to have a nice, deep brood nest, to store plenty of honey. In a horizontal shape. So it's one of our prototypes that we're developing here. And you can see it has two pieces of wood. So the outside edge here is paired with this inside part, which curves like the bottom of a boat. And between these two walls, we have also filled it with perlite insulation. So we've insulated it really on all sides, so the bees can stay nice and warm in the summer and nice and cool in the winter. Yeah.
Wow. This is definitely a full-time job you've got here.
Yeah.
You don't sit around much.
No. No, boredom is not one of my problems.
No.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for having us out. It's been just so eye-opening, and I've learned a ton. I'm sure our viewers have, and we all appreciate you.
Yeah, thank you. It's a joy to be with you today. Hopefully you and all of you will be able to join us here sometime.
Yeah, that would be nice. Sooner than later.
Yeah.